Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Diego with the beautiful Karina, my lovely prometida. And we're waiting for our K1 visa to get adjudicated at the lockbox. I said that's twice I've made that mistake. At the service center in California, Surf City, California. I love California. I've been there many times, especially when I was in the U.S. Navy. Now, there's folks out there, they want information about how many visas were approved in El Salvador. El Salvador, beautiful country. And come on along, we'll talk about El Salvador. I love El Salvador. The food especially. Now, I live in the panhandle of Florida near Pensacola and north of Navarre Beach. And in fact, this Thursday, I got to take a trip to Pensacola. Woo! All the traffic, I don't know. I'll find out. I've been in Colombia for 10 months. Now it's time to drive here. But anyway, I live there, and Karina is from Caracas, Venezuela. And she is a legal resident of Bogota, Colombia, where she's the manager at a couple of ice cream stores. And she also is into tax accounting. She's educated in university in tax accounting. Now, this video is about El Salvador. El Salvador is a word that means the savior, okay? And it is officially called the Republic of El Salvador. And in Spanish, it is República de El Salvador, okay? And it is a country in Central America. Now, this is your YouTube channel, boys and girls, and Selbin in El Salvador wanted me to make this video to talk about the home country and visas, etc. Okay, so shout out to Selbin. El Salvador is bordered on the northeast by Honduras. Wave to everybody in Honduras. And on the northwest by Guatemala. And on the south by the Pacific Ocean. El Salvador's capital and largest city is San Salvador. And the country's population as of 2023 was estimated or counted, I guess everybody went out and counted, was estimated to be 6.5 million people. Now I remember it when I was in Colombia, they did a census count there, and what they do in Colombia, they knock on the door, they count how many people live in the household, and they put a little sticker on above the door, and they sign it, and they say, okay, we counted this house. I'm pretty sure that's probably how they did it in El Salvador too. El Salvador also shares borders with Guatemala and Honduras, like I said, and the total boundary length is 339 miles. Now, I'm not going to say, I can't figure out what that is in kilometers. I don't work in kilometers. I live in the United States. I don't work in kilometers. But it's 339 miles, and it has a 126-mile border with Guatemala and a 213-mile border with Honduras. It is the only, this is interesting, it is the only Central American country that has no Caribbean coastline, okay? The coastline is on the Pacific, which is 191 miles long. So you can't go to the Caribbean. I remember I was in Colombia with Karina. We flew from Bogota to Cartagena. We spent a week in the Caribbean in Cartagena. So, sorry, El Salvador, you're missing out. Now, in order for any kind of civilization to survive, it needs water. And El Salvador has over 300 rivers, and the most important of which is the Rio Limpa. Okay? Now, it originates in Guatemala. The Rio Limpa cuts across the northern range of the mountains, flows along much of the central plateau, and cuts through southern volcanic range to empty into the Pacific. Now, even though El Salvador has 300 rivers, only one is navigable. Okay? So you can only travel on one. El Salvador has a tropical climate with either a wet season or a dry season. That's it. The rainy season extends from May through October, and this time of the year is referred to as inverno. Now, inverno is a Spanish word for winter, so that's interesting. Almost all the annual rainfall, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, occurs during this period of time. El Salvador also lies along the Pacific Ring of Fire and is thus subject to significant tectonic activity, including frequent earthquakes and volcanic activity, which is not good, but it's life. the capital San Salvador, the capital city, was totally destroyed, totally wiped off the map in 1756 and again in 1854, totally. And it suffered severe damage in 1919, 1982, and 1986 because of earthquakes and tremors. Oof. And recent examples include the earthquake on 13 January 2001 that measured 7.7 on the Richter magnitude scale and caused a landslide that killed more than 800 people. Woo! On a positive note, El Salvador has estimated over 500 species of birds, 1,000 species of butterflies, and 400 species of orchids, and 800 species of trees. Okay? Oh, don't forget, 800 species of marine fish. So El Salvador has lots and lots of different birds and butterflies, etc. There are actually 8 species of sea turtle in the world, okay, and 6 of them nest on the coast of Central America, and 4 of them make their home on the El Salvador coast. Fantastic. Castilian, also known as Spanish, is the official language and is spoken by virtually everybody. So everybody speaks Castilian, and although a very small number, around 500 people, speak the indigenous languages, the indigenous language of Nahuatl, by the peoples, indigenous peoples. Very interesting. It's unfortunate that the indigenous languages in El Salvador have pretty much gone to the wayside. They're extinct. Okay, like Pocomam, Caqueopera, and Lenca, they're extinct languages, okay? Quechua is spoken by indigenous immigrants of Guatemalan and Belgian origin, and they live in El Salvador. So there's folks from Belize and Guatemala who speak this indigenous language. Now let's talk about food. Ooh, my favorite subject. One of El Salvador's notable dishes is the pupusa. Okay, pupusas are handmade corn tortillas made of masa de maize or masa de arroz. You know, rice with corn. It's a maize of rice flour dough used in Latin American cuisine. It is a tortilla stuffed with cheese uses soft Salvadorian cheese such as quesillo, which is similar to mozzarella cheese, and chicharron or refried beans. And chicharron is like baby pig, baby pork. Football, ladies and gentlemen, football is the most popular sport in El Salvador, and the El Salvador national football team actually qualified for the FIFA World Cup in 1970, which I remember. Now I was about 8 years old, and I was watching the FIFA World Cup on the black and white TV, and I remember watching El Salvador play in the FIFA World Cup in 1970, and I also remember watching them play in 1982. Now let's talk about K1 visas. El Salvador, the folks in El Salvador, the U.S. Embassy approved 142 K1 visas were approved and adjudicated out of the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador. The address to the U.S. Embassy in El Salvador is right here, and the contact information. So if you live in El Salvador, come on along. We look forward to seeing you come to the United States with your K1 visa in your hand, your K2 visa in your hand. Come on, boys and girls from El Salvador. We welcome you to the United States, and we can't wait to see you get your visas approved. And to Selbin in El Salvador, thanks for the idea for the video. We are here for you. We are here for you guys. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we're now doing on Sundays at 5 p.m. Central Time. I'm doing once a week a live question and answer session live on YouTube, because I can get information to you guys much quicker that way than just creating individual videos. See you then, 5 p.m. Sunday, Central Time, live with Diego.
I'll be back.